Welcome to MuggleCast, your weekly ride into the Wizarding World fandom. I'm Andrew.
I'm Eric.
I'm Micah.
And I'm Laura.
On this week's episode, we are continuing our Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald character discussions with Jacob Kowalski. And we are going to discuss where he's been and where he is going. And to help us with today's discussion, we are joined by one of our Slug Club patrons, Roshni. Hi, Roshni. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hi. It's great to have you. You're a longtime listener of the show, right?
For over 10 years.
We're friendly with Roshni at this point. She's been at a bunch of our Zoom hangouts that we do for the podcast. Before we get to some news and then our Jacob discussion, let's get your fandom ID.
Okay. My favorite book is Prisoner of Azkaban. My favorite movie, if you'd asked me 3 weeks ago, it would have been Prisoner of Azkaban 2, but I just did a rewatch, and I'm going to say the extended edition of Sorcerer's Stone.
Ooh.
Wow.
I need those deleted scenes in there. I am a Hufflepuff, proud Hufflepuff, and I think I'm a Thunderbird, but I can't remember. My favorite baked good in the Muggle world is a cupcake. In the Wizarding world, it'd be a cauldron cake, basically chocolate. And what would I say to an augury if it cawed in front of me? I would say, well, hello to you too.
And don't they foretell death? Maybe we're going to talk about this later, but doesn't an augury's cry foretell death?
It's a very specific Crimes of Grindelwald themed fandom ID sub-question this week.
Yes. I love it. And we're having this recurring issue I've noticed on the show where people are like, I think my Overmorning house is this. And it's because we can't. Can we access that anymore? I know you can't take the test.
You can.
Yeah.
I just love how most of the time we manage to do an entire episode without having a single Gryffindor on the panel.
What's up with that? We thought it was the most popular house for the longest time.
I know. I feel like the last time we had a Gryffindor on was Ivana, right?
Wow.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I think we need to do a poll on our social media channels asking what Hogwarts house all of our listeners are. I think that'd actually be a fun little data point for us. Well, it's great to have you here, Roshni. Thanks so much for joining us today, and thanks for your support on Patreon.
Of course.
And actually, speaking of our Patreon, we are going to be revealing a couple of new and updated benefits for 2022 next week, so stay tuned for that. If you listening want to become a patron, check out patreon.com/MuggleCast. You can even pledge for a year up front. And if you do that, you will actually receive a 10% discount for making that year-long commitment. And by the way, existing patrons can upgrade to the annual membership as well and also get that discount. We don't talk about that benefit enough, and I think a lot of people like it. So definitely check that out. And thanks, everybody, for your support.
I did it.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yep. You said 10% discount and the first time, and I was like, and I'm going to go do that.
It works out to at least a month free.
Plus, then every month when it comes through, my husband can't say you're still paying for that. We don't have that money.
That's how you can sneakily become a patron.
A lot of perks.
You know what? A lot of people, not just MuggleCast listeners, but a lot of people say they prefer annual memberships because it's only one charge on their credit card a year.
Yes,
maybe for reasons like that. I hadn't considered that would be one of the reasons, but you're probably right. So anyway, let's move on to a little bit of news. Here's some good news for anybody who has been collecting the illustrated editions of the Harry Potter books. Illustrator Jim Kay announced the Order of the Phoenix illustrated edition is finished, and according to Bloomsbury's website, is going to be out October 11th. Goblet of Fire was released October 2019, so it's going to be a 3-year wait. So here's some other news. This is a little bit frustrating, but we wanted to share this as a sort of PSA. If you bought the Harry Potter ebooks through Pottermore.com, maybe 5-10 years ago at this point, you need to make sure you have them downloaded because they will no longer be available for download after January 31st. You might remember back in the day when Pottermore launched, it was the exclusive place to buy the Harry Potter ebooks when Harry Potter ebooks were finally released. Remember, it took a long time for the ebooks to finally come out. You couldn't buy them on Amazon or anywhere else. You had to buy them on Pottermore's website. It was some deal with Sony. And then what ended up happening was Pottermore Inc., the business side of Pottermore, was struggling financially for a few years, and then they finally started offering the Harry Potter ebooks everywhere else. And now they're about to be inaccessible for those of you who bought the ebooks through Pottermore's website. So download them. You have until the end of the month. And hold on to them, because if you lose them again, you're going to have to re-buy the Harry Potter books. And that is frustrating on multiple levels these days. By the way, these also don't work with Amazon Kindle. You have to convert them to a different format first. So that's a little frustrating as well, considering Kindle is one of the biggest e-readers, if not the biggest e-reader on the planet. And this is frustrating, and it's the second example of your once good digital purchase becoming inaccessible. We were talking about this with Wizards Unite. Some people spent some money, some real Muggle money, within Wizards Unite, the app that is now closing at the end of the month, and you're not going to be able to use that game anymore.
Let's also not forget about Wizarding World Gold as well. That's something that I know we talked about towards the end of last year that is no longer going to be available. So I think this franchise is going through a bit of a shift.
Yes.
Getting rid of things that maybe aren't profitable and aren't working as well as maybe they thought they would.
Clearing the deck, so to speak. Roshni, I think you have a note here that the Pottermore versions of the books are DRM free, meaning you can do whatever you want with them.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would take that and rather convert it than have like a file that's like, attached, like, all my Audible books, your Kindle books, like you can't tote that file around anywhere. And that's so frustrating. At least like this way, you have the downloaded copy, you own that downloaded copy, you can open that downloaded copy wherever. So, I mean, in some ways, that's more ownership than you would get if it was a Kindle file. So
true, right. The Kindle books, the audiobooks that you mentioned, they're locked to a specific platform.
Yeah.
Digital media that you purchase really might not be around forever, especially if it streams. So I'm really glad we're covering this just to give people the heads up. They have 17 more days to make a change. And
we're your Harry Potter friends. We look out for you.
Yeah.
And of course, just for the record, this problem with, spending money in digital worlds and then no longer having access to these things isn't exclusive to the Wizarding world. Just to be fair, it's something you got to keep in mind for all things that you buy digitally. Apple one day could decide, you know what? We're not going to give you access to those movies anymore. We're shutting down. It's unlikely, but it's possible.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's fair, though, for members of this community to expect better from the Wizarding World franchise because of how robust and longstanding this fandom is. I think it's not a very big ask to say, make these files accessible to people in perpetuity. They paid for them.
I agree.
Yeah, and if things were different with the author, you may even have the author advocating on behalf of what you just said, Laura.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like we bought them from her website. Like she announced that it existed. We bought them there. That's that store. Why wouldn't Warner Brothers or whoever owns the rights, Scholastic, why wouldn't they continue to offer and own the rights if you purchased ones? I get that. I think it is different with Harry Potter.
All good points. All right, so let's get to our main discussion today. Eric, we're talking about Jacob.
We are. And first I have to ask you, Andrew, there was a big announcement that you said there was going to be a big announcement, major announcement. Micah's shirt may offer us some clues for those who are watching. But what is this big announcement we teased? Because I got like 5 different emails going, what's it going to be? What's happening?
Oh, yeah. Man. Okay. Well, don't get too excited.
It was that hyped up.
When we do these character discussions, typically we time them around a certain character's birthday. So if we're talking about Harry or Hermione, whoever, and we wanted to talk about Jacob in the lead up to the 3rd Fantastic Beasts movie. And we said, okay, well, when's Jacob's birthday? Let's just have a discussion whenever month his birthday is. And there is no birthday for him as far as we can find. So we said, why don't we give him a birthday? And then I said, well, why don't we put his birthday on one of those dumb national XYZ holidays that you always read about? National Pizza Day, National Wear Your Sunglasses Day, National Drink 3 Cups of Coffee Day. There's so many
National
of these.
Wear Your MuggleCast t-shirt day. Yeah.
Yes. Oh,
yeah.
Man, we're part of the problem.
June
I actually
2nd,
really
by
don't
the
like
way,
these
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
days. I think they're silly. But anyway, so we looked in January and we found a couple of days that we thought would fit Jacob perfectly. And we decided that January 15th, National Bagel Day, is going to be Jacob Kowalski's birthday. This is canon, according to MuggleCast.
And here's the thing, as I said in the chat when we were discussing this, as far as we know, Jacob is a New Yorker, right? So he loves his bagels. There's no question.
So true.
Absolutely.
That's it.
I love
There's
bagels.
no debate.
I live for bagels. I have bagels being delivered to my house today. It's called Bantam bagels because I can't find them in stores. I had to start ordering them online. I got desperate.
On the 15th, I'm going to be sure to carry my everything bagel seasoning around with me and put it on everything I eat in honor of Jacob Kowalski.
So listen up, MuggleNet, Harry Potter Lexicon, and fans, listeners, we need you to rally around this. Please go to the Harry Potter Wiki, all those places. Get his new birthday into these Wikipedia pages. January 15th is Jacob's birthday. You heard it here first. Thank you.
I think
we should also try and make it National Demiguise Shaped Pastry Day in honor of Jacob.
Yes.
I love that idea.
That's a wonderful idea. I think that this is perfectly fair. I mean, as you'll all recall, we made some official fandom announcements about the Harry Potter reunion, the 20-year reunion on HBO Max. We found out a list of things that happened behind the scenes that weren't featured in the documentary, and they were absolutely true. So
it's a good point.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of scoops on this show. A lot of scoops. And by the way, I did go to nationaldaycalendar.com. The site catalogs all the national days, quote unquote. And I did submit one for Jacob, and I haven't heard back yet, but I'll let everybody know if they accept
Have faith,
our
Andrew.
proposal. I called it National Muggle Bread Baking Day. I didn't think they would want a specific name. That's in the rules.
Yeah.
No specific names. And I explained to them why we want to create this day.
Do you think Jacob is a schmear kind of guy on the bagel?
I feel like he's a lox and schmear.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Lox is salmon, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Lox is so good.
I do know. Yeah.
What kind of bagel do you think he likes? Is it in everything? Cinnamon raisin, maybe?
Oh, I can see that.
This isn't healthy, but I love a salt bagel with veggie cream cheese.
Oh, those are so good. Or what about
all of this discussion already is making me hungry.
I know. I'm really upset.
What about the cheddar bagels? They have that cheese crust on them.
Like an Asiago cheese bagel.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh.
Real good.
I just love a bagel sandwich. Oh, my gosh.
You're making me really hungry.
I know. What are we doing? Let's move on. Come on, Eric.
Yeah, they're all shaped like beasts or something. So this is, as we have been doing, a continuation of our original character discussions from the first Fantastic Beasts. And this one, of course, uses all of the information we found out in Crimes of Grindelwald. In particular, the episode where we first discussed Jacob as a character discussion was 319. So if anybody wants to reference that or is interested in the continuity of it all, May 8th, 2017 is when we last discussed Jacob as a character discussion. And we're back. So we already covered why we're talking about him today. And getting back to some of the overall themes of our previous discussion, again, we're pulling those same threads again. We talked about how Jacob's role in the first Fantastic Beasts movie is really to be both an accessibility standpoint for the audience to really get this Muggle's view of the wizarding world, as well as his place emotionally as the heart of the film. And there's a lot that Crimes of Grindelwald does differently, but I think that still both of those things are true about Jacob. I think he, maybe in a smaller way, still is the heart of the film, but also still is kind of our eyes and ears into the craziness that all these wizards have going on. Do you guys agree?
I do. And I really feel Newt, I think, stayed true to character. But we've spoken before about how Queenie in particular really deviates from the character that was presented to us in the first Fantastic Beasts film. That's not true for Jacob. Jacob is himself. His character continues to be strong. And based on his experience fighting in a war, he knows an autocratic sociopath when he sees one. And he's very quick to call that out about Grindelwald. So that just made me connect with him more as a character, because even as the most vulnerable character in that room, he stood up for what was right. And that makes him my favorite. He's great.
That's a great point. Yeah, when you talk about him being vulnerable, I'm brought back to that line from the first film, your skull is susceptible to damage. It's like everything is susceptible to damage. He can't defend himself. He doesn't have a wand yet.
And Jacob is just such a refreshing aspect of the series because it is a Muggle getting a leading role in this story.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always appreciated that about Jacob.
Now, Roshni, you actually had a really interesting point here about Jacob's character being an archetype.
Yeah, actually, my husband had brought this up when I was rewatching for tonight, and he's like, he really is like everyone's favorite, right? It's like, definitely. He said, it's too bad he's an archetype, and it's like, he's kind of like the larger man whose weight kind of gets played for comic laughs, and then who is with the woman who's sort of like out of his league. And I was like, it's not a bad point. So he kind of, I guess, in a way, is an archetype. I could do without I could have done without the scene with the suitcase in the first movie where he's like can't get into the suitcase and is jumping around. It's funny, but it's also not funny, I guess.
Yeah.
In a way, I guess he's an archetype, but I don't know if that matters because we love him anyway, right?
Yeah.
It's an archetype that works.
I'd be curious if his size was written into the role initially, or if they felt really strongly about Dan Fogler. I wonder which came first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they put in the scene with the suitcase after, where he like can't get into the suitcase.
Right, yeah, sort of like
jumping around.
For a visual gag.
Maybe. Yeah.
It might have even been that actor's idea. Like, wouldn't it be funny if I jump in kind of a thing?
That's true.
Just don't know. I will say they're probably going to get away from the larger bodied physical humor because Dan Fogler's losing weight. You can tell even in the third trailer, he's lost a significant amount of weight. And so Jacob himself, he's been laying off the pastries.
Well, even when we saw him, was it 2 years ago at LeakyCon in Boston,
Mm-hmm.
he had slimmed down pretty significantly.
Yeah, I also wondered in that first movie if they maybe enhanced that a bit as part of the joke, because there are times in the film where I'm not sure if he's wearing some kind of padding or something, which would also speak to Roshni's point about having the fat character as the comic relief. And I think as a society, we are starting to get away from that because it's just cheap. It's cheap humor. It's okay, let's go for the low hanging fruit and make fat jokes. And it's there are so many other ways to be creative and make a character loved. And I think that that's something that Jacob's character and that Dan Fogler and his portrayal really shows, is that there doesn't need to be a commentary on his physical appearance because he's honestly one of the best characters in the franchise.
Definitely. And I didn't even think about this now until this was brought up, but the whole erumpent scene where he's getting chased and he goes and he runs up the tree, and doesn't the tree start to give a little bit?
That's right, it does. But I think it's also partly because the erumpent does something to the tree.
Yeah, it puts its horn into it.
Yeah,
right?
Or heats it up or something. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
It glows.
Liquid hot magma.
Right. But it's not as funny if you have the super athletic wizard running away from the erumpent.
Right.
Right. Because
the stakes aren't as high. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I believe, Mikey, you added some other ideas just about, Jacob's role, introducing the audience from a Muggle's perspective.
So we started talking about this a little bit. I think Andrew actually touched on it a bit already, but I thought it could be interesting to talk about Jacob's role as our ambassador in the Fantastic Beasts series. This is really the first time that we've seen a Muggle be fully immersed into the wizarding world. This never really happened during Harry Potter, and I think it makes sense that it didn't. I think there was a story to tell, and the story was focused on Harry. So adding somebody with really no magical background would have probably just taken away from that. But I'm just curious, why introduce in this series a Muggle as one of the core four? Is it because it's an adult series as opposed to Harry Potter, which you could argue became an adult series, but at the beginning probably wasn't?
I think the fact that it's new and exciting that we are seeing adult characters firsthand, adult wizard characters, period, that maybe it's in an effort to just do all the different things we really didn't have a chance to during Harry Potter. So that involves bringing in a Muggle, involving him in situations where he can see what's going on and do what's going on, as opposed to a Muggle child would never have had a place in the original stories, like you're saying. So maybe it's just in the interest of doing something completely new and fresh.
Well, then, of course, you think about the Grindelwald angle with him wanting to end the International Statute of Secrecy. Putting a Muggle directly in the middle of this conflict makes it all the more interesting as well. And then, of course, we think about what happened with Queenie in Crimes of Grindelwald. So
yeah,
I think it's those two things. I think it's also just an interesting way to shake up the Wizarding World stories. I wouldn't be surprised if we do see future stories, official stories. We're seeing some more Muggle-Wizard relations, larger relations, or maybe some more intimate relationships. So there's a lot of interesting angles I think you could take when you work a Muggle into the Wizarding World.
I think it was also probably done with the hope that it could draw in more fans to the Wizarding World, maybe people who missed the boat on Harry Potter, because they could come see these movies and actually kind of feel like they were seeing Jacob's perspective of the world and learning about it that way. So that maybe the concept of this magical world didn't feel like there was quite such a barrier of entry, you know? So that was probably part of it.
Yeah, I like that.
I thought of this. It's Jacob Kowalski is Harry Potter's I love magic line spread out to a character.
Basically.
Like a character form in this movie, and it works in the movies, and it works really well.
It also could be to give the main character in Newt a Muggle best friend, right? Kind of blending those two worlds together. Somebody who himself was an outcast, and at least in his own mind, and wasn't able to find any friends. He says as much, I think, in the first movie. So to have somebody who's a friend from that other world, I think, was really cool.
I wonder if he's kind of there for the main characters and all the characters in the story to kind of be like, see, you guys kind of hate Muggles, not hate Muggles, but you think so poorly of Muggles, and that they shouldn't have any interaction with wizards. But here's a Muggle who's not only, helping us with our villain, helping us defeat Grindelwald, who's, okay, I mean, he does, attack Muggles, but, he's someone who's an antagonist to the Wizarding World. And here's a Muggle who's not persecuting wizards, who's not trying to steal magic or whatever. And so maybe he's there to kind of be that sort of proof too.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Kind of like a fundamentally good guy who's not, all the lies you're about to tell is about Muggles just are disproven by one look at this guy. The other thing is, with Jacob too, the universe or the world we were introduced to in 1920s America was so aggressively more anti-Muggle than the 90s Britain that we're familiar with. So to really have them go so hard against, quote, the No-Maj in the 20s and not have that like a Muggle character to kind of bounce that off of would have seemed pretty weird. We might not have taken it as strongly as being like, oh, now there's like a forbidden love element to the series.
Mm-hmm. Right, that's a great
So how
point.
crazy the law is that Queenie can't marry and him can't get married.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're Jacob, and I wanted to know, since we're Jacob, what would we have done in his shoes after the first film? Would we have packed it up? And we probably would have remembered some things because of the swooping evil, or would we have wanted to get a little bit more magic in the future?
I think after you get a taste of that, you want to come back for more, even though it is really dangerous.
How can you not want more?
Yeah, it's just so dangerous, though. So you got to give him the fact that he is quite brave.
Maybe he's the Gryffindor. He's the Gryffindor in today's discussion.
Yeah, maybe he is. If I were him, though, and I had gone through everything that I've gone through, assuming that me and Queenie reconcile over our differences about love potions, I would insist upon therapy before we proceeded any further with that relationship. There's a lot of baggage to unpack there. So that's what I would do.
That's just a good call with any of these relationships.
Yeah.
Like, go talk to somebody first.
Especially on episodes where BetterHelp is a sponsor.
Oh, but that's not this episode, is it, Andrew?
It is. Just not right now.
Just not right now. Oh, but now we have a different ad break.
Yes, so that is right. This week's episode is sponsored by Indeed. Running a couple of businesses over the years myself, I know that hiring can be a difficult process. You don't know where to start looking. You might get worried if you're selecting the right candidate or not. And of course, you have to spend so much time looking for new employees. If this resonates with you and you are hiring, you need Indeed. Because Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. And Indeed is the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applications that meet your must-have requirements, or else you don't pay. That is a game changer and makes Indeed a no-brainer. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites hoping to find candidates with the right skills, use Indeed as your powerful hiring partner that can help you do it all. Indeed partners with you on every step of the hiring process. Find great talent through time-saving tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. And with Instant Match, as soon as you sponsor a post, you get a short list of quality candidates with resumes on Indeed that match your job description, and you can invite them to apply right away. Plus, you only pay for quality applications that meet your must-have requirements. Indeed makes it easy to hire great talent. According to ComScore, Indeed is the #1 job site worldwide. For all these reasons and more, you've got to check out Indeed. Start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/MuggleCast. Offer valid through March 31st. Go to Indeed.com/MuggleCast to claim your $75 credit before March 31st. Indeed.com/MuggleCast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Returning to our character discussion on Jacob Kowalski, the first two questions we ask, or have been asking when getting into Crimes of Grindelwald discussions is, what happened to the character between the films, and what happens to the character sort of at the beginning of the movie where we find them? So let's focus on what happened between the films to Jacob. We are told that even though we agonize over how Jacob's memory, which was taken from him supposedly in the first movie, how it would come back to him. How can he still be part of the Core Four if he doesn't remember anything? And there were theories. We theorized for a long time, many episodes, about how big a deal the memory loss thing was going to be. And it turns out it's not a big deal at all, because apparently he never forgot some stuff, because they weren't all bad memories and the swooping evil potion, even though he looks and blinks a couple times toward the sky. Apparently, it wasn't that big of a deal, and Jacob didn't actually forget his closest wizard friends.
But see, I do feel like he did temporarily forget still, and it took a little time for his memory to come back. Or they were completely misleading us at the end of the first Fantastic Beasts movie, because there's a couple of key scenes. Jacob's in his shop, and he gets asked by a Muggle how he comes up with the ideas for his pastries, and he claims he doesn't know how he comes up with these ideas. When I was thinking about this yesterday, I was like, well, maybe he actually was just lying there. So let's assume he was lying, and he's just, just to play along. But then Queenie walks in, and Jacob grabs the back of his own neck and has a glint of recognition in his eye. It looks like he sort of recognizes Queenie, but doesn't really. And so I think the only feasible explanation for these brief lapses of forgetfulness, because I really do think Jacob did forget, at least in this little period that we're seeing, is that his memory was wiped, but it took a little bit of time for the good memories to come back. Because if you're put in that situation, I would still think it would affect your brain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The impression that I got was that those good memories were still accessible somewhere deep in his subconscious, and that seeing Queenie is what kind of jarred his memory, or jogged his memory, and brought all of the positive memories of everything that happened back. But question, did it bring the bad memories back too? Does he remember the bad stuff that happened, or only the good stuff?
That's what confuses me about that scene, because he reaches for the Murtlap bite, which wouldn't have been a positive memory unless he really enjoyed getting snacked on by a Murtlap.
I mean, who wouldn't? Right?
Who doesn't? But I don't know. I always felt that scene too was too quick. I know they want to give you a little bit of hope at the end of the movie, but he literally just had his memory erased several minutes earlier, and already they're giving you this clue that he's not really going to forget what happened. I feel like they could have held that off till the next movie.
Yeah, like we needed to end the movie somewhere, but like, don't worry, guys, it's going to be fine.
On the boat. They could have done it on the boat.
Yeah. Well, it just, I would say we all have like really good ideas here, but the way that the dialogue in Crimes of Grindelwald, it comes across like there was no temporary lapse even, because it's just like, oh, it was fine. You said yourself, Newt, only bad memories would be erased by the swooping evil. And now Queenie and I are great,
Yeah.
So I just think it doesn't honor sort of what has been proposed in a way.
It does say that Queenie fills him in on some of the bad stuff in that line too.
Okay, that's
I don't have much bad memories. I have scary memories and something else weird memories, but not too many, not bad ones. And everything else Queenie filled me in on. So, so I think there was like the little gaps in there that Queenie filled in that he considered bad, but that doesn't answer the question of the Murtlap bite being bad or good.
And see, stuff like this just strikes me, and I'm not saying this is like a broad statement about the entire wizarding world, but things like this, things like time turners, which are one of our favorite plot holes, these things just kind of feel like lazy world building to me. It's like, if you make it that easy for somebody to get their memory back, then what's the cost? What's the trade-off?
Yeah.
If there's no risk, then it's not, there's no payoff for that moment when he does get his memory back.
Right. Not to mention, it seems like they kind of purposely misled us at the end of Fantastic Beasts 1 to make it feel like his memory was truly gone. And then to fix it so quick, it's like, well, then the end of Fantastic Beasts should have been different.
Right.
The first movie.
Yeah. But they got so much to do in Crimes of Grindelwald, they have to like tie up all the loose ends from the first film and just be like, okay, now we need to hit the ground running with Jacob already knowing everything about Newt. There's no time for him to like relearn in the movie. So we're just going to write it off. We're just going to say, oh, it's fine.
I tend to think that probably they ended movie 1 the way they did, just in case there ended up only being one movie. Like, it had to feel like a contained enough story on its own in case the franchise didn't end up taking off. I don't really recall what the filming schedule was, or if they were already filming Crimes of Grindelwald by the time Fantastic Beasts 1 came out, but it could be that they were just trying to make the first film like a contained story just in case.
That's a good point. Considering Jacob's Bakery, seeing it finally, furnished and in action is one of the highlights of the film.
It was a heartfelt moment. I think that was their goal with that whole scene.
It had to have been some time though, right? So if we think about it, when Newt comes across him and gives him the alchemy shells to use as collateral for the bank, and then he had in that time to get the collateral, build the bakery, start baking those pastries and getting customers. And so there must have been a fair amount of time before Queenie came back to see him, right?
That's right. And that's another weird sort of, I think it's the territory of like plot hole areas, because so much happens in what is, I think, supposed to be either a 3 or 9 month period of time, depending on, because even Crimes of Grindelwald, the movie starts and then does like a time jump. So it's really unclear, like with Grindelwald's escape, and then it's like 6 months after that. So all this stuff is happening between the cracks that could honestly flesh out its own Fantastic Beasts movie, I feel, or like a really lengthy fanfic somewhere in the gap. Because like everything from Newt's book signing, things that didn't make it into Crimes of Grindelwald all happen in this mysterious period in between films. And the film takes no time to actually deal with it.
We need a post-credit scene.
Pre-credit
adding
scene.
those.
And a pre-credit scene.
Movie 1 had like 7 endings. We need 7 openings to Crimes of Grindelwald, like that address all
a
these.
Short film like Disney animated movies do.
Any of them would be less confusing.
Oh, like an Animatrix, version that's just pre-COG stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But so anyway, moving on a little bit, and we really talked about this on the Queenie episode, but in between films, they've gotten back together. So Jacob, has his memory, knows Queenie, is in love with Queenie just like he was before, but something fundamentally has changed. Queenie cannot trust that Jacob's love for her will survive this prejudice that the United States has against no-majs, and resorts to administering the love potion, taking away Jacob's agency and abducting him and traveling to London without Jacob knowing about it. He's happy to be there. It's somewhere he always wanted to go here. But Queenie has taken that choice away from Jacob. And because we talked about that so much on the Queenie episode, I kind of just want to focus on what it says about Jacob's character, that once he wakes up and there's that confrontation scene in the street, he's very sympathetic towards Queenie for what she's done. And you can tell that I think that the love is genuine there. And, you know, he would have a right to be upset with Queenie. And I think that he's kind of chooses to focus on wanting to keep her where she is. When you know, they argue and she runs off, it's obviously the last thing he ever wanted, but he's also not screaming and shouting at her for what she did to him. And I think that says something about his character.
Yeah, he's assuming her positive intent, right? He's assuming that she wasn't doing this to try and take my choices away from me. She was doing this because she loves me and she wants us to be able to be together. That's immediately where his brain went. And you're right, Eric. That does say so much about him as a character.
And he realizes the relationship looks over, so now he's trying to do whatever he can.
Yeah. But, I mean, the stakes were pretty high. He says to her, when were you going to tell me? After we had a couple of kids? I mean, the idea of missing those parenting moments of your firstborn, secondborn, all these things that Jacob would do in a drug-induced haze if his best buddy Newt didn't, you know, tell Queenie she was doing it wrong and fixed it. He would have missed some crucial moments in his immediate family's life because of what Queenie chose to do with him. And, you know, his whole arc this film is about getting Queenie back and trying to convince her that she, you know, that they're going to be okay. She doesn't deserve him, is what I'm trying to say.
Do you think she would have waited that long, though? I mean, the real point of contention was that it was illegal for them to get married, right? So do you think she would just been like, well, now we're married, so we'll face it, you know?
Together. Yeah, I mean, it's not illegal to marry Muggles in the UK where they are.
Well, yeah, and she says that, right? So, like, I actually had a question about that. So, like, if they had gotten married in the UK and they went back to America, would Queenie be arrested? Like, what if it was a couple that was emigrating from England, like not someone who's originally from America, like Queenie, and, you know, it's a Muggle, non-Muggle relationship. Are they going to be like, no, you can't live here because you married a Muggle? Like, that seems intensely crazy for a government. A little authoritarian there. Like,
yeah, but I don't know. There are definitely circumstances, like past and present, where marital status is a big issue in certain countries and people will lie. And so I would imagine that Queenie and Jacob, had they gotten married in the UK and gone back to the US, they would have just had to be married in secret. Like, I don't know if they would have been able to live together or if they would have had some kind of arrangement where they did live together, but Queenie just always apparated in and out of the house so no one saw her coming and going. Just seems like a pretty stressful existence. And Jacob would be, you know, put in this position of choosing between the love of his life and being in the UK where they could be most comfortable, or being in his city and running his bakery that has been his dream. That's really an impossible choice that's being thrust upon him in this moment. And I think he handles it pretty well.
Yeah.
Personally, I would have been mad if I had been in his shoes.
This got brought up earlier, but I do think this whole sequence really speaks to Jacob's character, because if you think about it, he was making a decision from the start that would have ultimately protected Queenie in them not getting married, because I think more so than thinking about himself, he was thinking about her. And then he's probably 50 times, if not 100 times more vulnerable than your average person. And she takes advantage of that. There's no way that he would have been able to protect himself against a memory charm. He's not a wizard as far as we know. And so it's almost like it's even worse what she did because he's a Muggle.
Yes.
And then he is this forgiving person, as was pointed out, after the fact. So I just think you can't find a nicer guy than Jacob Kowalski.
No, and he's too good for her, but I'll stop repeating that. But, I think too that this whole conflict they're in, that a love potion was the nuclear option. You got a person who really genuinely wants to be with you. Sure, things are a little complicated, but he's got the right attitude. And if you love somebody, that's going to be enough. You're going to figure it out. But circumstances unforeseen have pushed Queenie to be doing the love potion thing within just a couple of months of dating him and gallivanting away. Maybe it's Tina's approval that she didn't get because Teeny apparently didn't like it or approve because it's against the law. But I don't really think that's the way sisters would behave too if it really stressed the issue, if you really stress the point that the love is genuine. So just for the contrivances of the plot, that's what Queenie resorted to. But it just doesn't make sense to me. So thank gosh that Jacob is so forgiving. Otherwise, the rest of the film would be like, we're going to Paris to chase the plot. But if I see my girlfriend there, that's totally fine. I don't care. What she did to me is unforgivable. It would kind of fall a little flat.
Right.
You'd be surprised as someone in a mixed race relationship and knows others who've also been in a society and culture that's less welcoming of that. You'd be surprised how family can be not tolerant of, even today, of these kinds of things. So, but she says, we're not talking today. But I think ultimately Tina would have come around, of course, to their marriage or to their relationship because it's love for her sister. But it doesn't surprise me that they were arguing about it to begin with.
That's a fair point. And Tina is very straight-laced, but I think she got to know Jacob during the first film. But the big highlight for me of Jacob's character and throughout the film is really getting to see him and Newt come back, their reunion. These are like the best buds of the Wizarding World. I mean, the first Fantastic Beasts film was kind of an ensemble film with a lot of time devoted to all four of the core four. But this film, for whatever reason, the ladies are cut out. They're just in the fringe. And the main pairing of our heroes is Jacob and Newt. And they get along extremely well. You can tell they care about each other. There's this chance for Jacob, his situation aside, to offer relationship advice to Newt, who's also new at relationships. And it's a wonderful brotherhood that these two characters have, which I think is one of the highlights of Crimes of Grindelwald.
Yeah, and it's all showing off Dan Fogler's comedic chops. Rewatching all these scenes last night, yeah. I was laughing out loud at a lot of his stuff. Like, he's just genuinely a very funny person. And a lot of characters were split up into separate groups in Crimes of Grindelwald, right? But it looks like in Secrets of Dumbledore, we'll be getting Jacob, Newt, and Theseus, and Eulalie Hicks all together for most of the movie. At least that's how the trailer makes it look like.
Don't forget Bunty.
And Bunty, right? So
on use of comma, you can't forget him either.
No. So at least Jacob and Newt will still be together, and we'll presumably get a lot more of what we saw in Crimes of Grindelwald in terms of their chemistry.
One of the reasons we asked Roshni what she would do in the presence of an augury is because Jacob, when he goes into Newt's basement, the augury behind him cowls or caws, and he says, "Hey, bud or pal, I got problems of my own."
So is that caw equivalent to a cry of an augury, or would cry be longer?
I feel like we'll look back at that scene and be like, that was some foreshadowing.
He's going to die.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all going to die. That's not really good. Like,
he's going to die within this storyline, not of old age, of Grindelwald killing him or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, if that's all the augury can do, that's not really helpful.
Yeah. So we're being shown kind of all the magical parts of Newt's basement and all the cool things it does. Newt dries himself off. He gets Jacob's coat for him. And this is just an opportunity, like you were saying, for the audience to really be like, wow, ooh, ah, magic. kind of a thing, because he's excited.
This is what it would be like if I was in the Wizarding World. And this is probably what they're going for when they're putting Jacob in Hogwarts in Fantastic Beasts 3, right? It's, again, us feeling like, oh, Jacob represents all of us. He, the Muggle, gets to go to Hogwarts. I'm so jelly. He's living my dream right now.
Absolutely. And, Newt could be in a really dark place right now. Tina's not talking to him. There's been this huge misunderstanding. Overall, the plot could drag you down because everything Grindelwald's planning is not good. But I think that the relationship between Jacob and Newt, again, really keeps Newt in this happy, thoughtful, introspective state, which is exactly what his character needs to really grow in this movie. Like, Newt is being tasked with an actual mission from actual Dumbledore. We now know Dumbledore's no longer hiding, saying, oh, why don't you take that Thunderbird back and see what happens? It's an active mission from Dumbledore, and that could be really a lot of pressure. But Jacob very, diffuses that pressure for Newt.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just helps to have your Muggle buddy with you.
Well, I also wonder if Newt really likes Jacob because he kind of sees Jacob as a sort of beast to study, in that he is not a fellow wizard. He is a Muggle. I don't really get that vibe while I'm watching the scenes. Like, you don't see Newt studying Jacob's every move like Arthur Weasley might a Muggle or a rubber duck or some other Muggle object. But I just feel like maybe in the back of his head a little bit, he's like, oh, this is my pet Muggle that I get to take along with me, and I get to learn about these kinds of creatures as well. Newt's obviously a very curious guy, so I think it's probably fascinating for him to inject a Muggle into the Wizarding World.
Which, it's just so interesting to have those two as talking about romance, because Jacob, we know in cutscenes from the first film, had a fiance who originally in the first film dumped him. Which would have been another really sad scene for Jacob in the first movie on top of all the others. But for him to give Newt advice on who to date is just so funny, because it's like, well, he doesn't know any better than Newt. But I think it's that camaraderie. It's, if Jacob's a different species to Newt, then women are certainly a different species to Newt and to Jacob. And so these two clueless guys walking around Paris, looking for a guy with a feather in his cap, talking about girls. I can see the appeal on the page and on the screen of why that pairing works and is rich for the story.
Yeah.
True, but Newt isn't a complete novice. I mean, he presumably was in a relationship with Lita.
Yeah, I because it's not shown, I don't get that, and I often forget it. You're right, though. There is definitely something between him and Lita, enough so that it makes him cautious around Theseus, who's now dating her and is engaged.
Yeah, I almost got the impression about Newt and Lita's relationship that it was sort of like the one who got away syndrome, like there was a vibe there was chemistry, but for whatever reason, the timing just never worked out. But they were both aware of the mutual attraction, and it just so happened that life went on and she ended up dating Theseus. With regard to Newt and sort of his closeness with Jacob, maybe his fascination with Jacob, I think a big part of that is that Newt, we can see he's kind of an outcast amongst wizards because of his fascination with beasts. And he is so often used to people discounting the value of wizarding beasts, and so used to having his interests downplayed. And Jacob doesn't do that to him. Jacob is fascinated and in awe of any and everything magic. So that's got to be a huge rush for Newt to be like, oh my God, my life's work, somebody cares about it. And this person's my friend. So
that was the part of the impression I got too, that it was like he saw Jacob with the animals and being kind to them, and it made him think differently about him. And then they both fought in the war. If being with the dragons on the Eastern Front means that Newt fought in the war,
right?
And but maybe it's not that he's a beast like a Muggle. Maybe it's because he's likable. Because he has that line in the first movie where he says, "People like you, don't they?" So maybe that's where he's like sort of like observing this guy that people actually like talking to and get along with him. And so he's like, what is this? I don't understand.
Yeah. There's less social awkwardness there. So, talking about this detective duo traipsing through Paris, it's pretty exciting to see. By the time they get to the safe house, although they haven't been able to reunite with Queenie, which is a shame, and we know that she actually was very close to them and nearly kind of reunited. She hears them in her head. By the time they get to the safe house, we are presented with another opportunity for the Muggle to really experience the Wizarding World, and for the people who've read Harry Potter to see in character Nicholas Flamel, this 600-year-old man.
The Crypt
and
Keeper.
Jacob has the line, what is it? You don't look a day over 375 or something like that. It's an interesting opportunity for humor again, because they shake hands, Jacob and Nicholas Flamel, and he kind of cracks a bone, and it's kind of a wince of pain. Very funny stuff.
Because he's old. I thought that was kind of cheap to me. Like, he cracked his hand because he's old. Like, how do you get to that age? Probably. How do you get to that age and just now your hands break? I don't know. It was strange. Strange.
What's the point of the elixir of life? Yeah, right. If you can live to 660 plus using the elixir of life, but not maintain vitality, how is he so frail? It's obviously a visual gag and like a sight gag, but I don't think that's right.
If his hand could crack or break that easily, why can he still stand? Like, it's just all too on the nose. It's too cartoonish.
Yeah.
It's too Saturday morning cartoonish.
It was.
Yeah. But I think having Jacob there grounds it in a way, because you do ultimately, it softens the blow of how awkward the whole Nicholas Flamel thing is.
I think it probably just depends like what angle you're coming from, in the sense that like if you were a Harry Potter fan waiting to see Nicholas Flamel in this series, I feel like you kind of got cheapened a bit with like a 2019 version of the Crypt Keeper. It's I think back because I've read a couple books in the Secrets of the Immortal Nicholas Flamel, and there are moments where, because he's not taking the elixir, then he starts to get frail, then he starts to get weak. But he shouldn't. Presumably he's been taking his potion, so he should be like a vibrant, like probably equivalent, maybe like in his 30s and his 40s, not have his hand getting broken by this, rough and tumble New Yorker.
Well, and the stone is right there. It's in his house. Right. We see it in the pantry or the cupboard. So yeah, he definitely is taking the potion. It shouldn't be this huge issue where he's like, oh, I got to dust off my wand. Like, I haven't seen battle in what it is. There's a line about how long it's been for him. And I'm just like, well, that's fun and all, but really it's just Jacob really softens those moments, like where they go to the crystal ball and he's like, oh, I looked into one of these at the fair once. It's enjoyable. It's fun. It's accessible, when otherwise it wouldn't work if Jacob specifically weren't there.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of how they did Nicholas Flamel. It's just not what you imagine when you think about Nicholas Flamel from reading the Harry Potter books. Like,
no.
Just why would you want to live that long? There's nothing there worth it for it.
Well, and also just based on what we know about what the elixir of life is supposed to be able to do. And to Eric's point, you would want to be in your prime all the time. That's kind of the point. So yeah, I agree. I mean, reading Sorcerer's Stone, for example, when Harry and Dumbledore are talking about Nicholas Flamel at the end of the first book, the image I had in my head of Nicholas Flamel was not the Crypt Keeper.
Well, and the elixir of life is compared to be so much better than unicorn blood, which keeps you alive even if you are an inch from death. But like, the elixir in Crimes of Grindelwald seems to be keeping Nicholas Flamel exactly at an inch from death. Like if Jacob had squeezed a little bit harder, an arm would have come out of its socket, like a pop out of the elbow, and it would have been...
That would have been it.
Totally nuts.
Do you think if Voldemort had seen this movie, do you think he would want the Sorcerer's Stone as much as he did in the first book?
He would have gotten a no. Yeah. He wouldn't have wasted his time. That's a waste of time. Especially if you're already a wisp. Like Voldemort at the time was like a wisp of smoke.
And imagine how much older Voldemort would have looked. Like the stone wasn't exactly helping Nicholas Flamel from keeping some youthful-ish looks.
I really wonder if they're going to revise the whole art design around that character in future installments, because I'd love to see Nicholas Flamel, this badass 500-plus-year-old wizard, really lay it down, or if he was just a movie tube feature.
Maybe Jacob's going to take him to the gym and he's going to get him in shape, bulk him up a little bit, and that's
Training
how they're going to
montage.
That's how they're going to get
some carbs. Here's some sour cream.
That's how they're going to get what they did to Flamel back on track. Here's some bagels. Jacob will give him some protein bagels.
So, Roshni, you had a question here about the crystal ball scene, and particularly with Jacob.
Yeah, so, I mean, they're looking at the crystal ball and they see Père Lachaise, I think that's how you say it. And,
nice.
And he says, he sees Queenie, he says that's where she is. But how does he see this? I don't understand. Like, does he have the sight? Does Nicholas Flamel have the sight? So, like, if Nicholas Flamel has the sight and he can see it, does that mean that anyone standing next to him could also see it? In which case, then why would they have those OWL exams, where they have to tell the examiner what they're seeing? It doesn't make sense. How does Jacob see it?
Sounds like a plot hole. That's my answer.
Oh,
wow.
That's a great observation, though.
Either that, or it was them trying to leave breadcrumbs to imply that Jacob might have some sort of magical ability that was dormant most of his life.
In the trailer of the next movie, we see him with a wand, so we can't, at this point, discount it.
I know.
He is not a wizard.
I hate
Period.
I think that, too, I remember talking when this movie first came out. There's so many things in this movie. Like, we're getting different branches of the magic than we've gotten before, which would normally be cool. But when it's not explained, it's confusing. So there's so many times in this movie where a crystal ball or thin air in front of you is made to look like basically security camera footage. They do it with Credence in the beginning when Newt's in the Ministry too. And it's like, how is this basin showing like current events of somebody from basically like a camera's perspective? The crystal ball is just another opportunity, another example of that security kind of CCTV footage that's tapped into by magical means. Right. It's a lazy shortcut of the plot to showcase something, and it doesn't actually mean anything that this Muggle is seeing a magical object the way that it would mean something if it were in the Harry Potter books. Mm-hmm. That's my explanation.
I guess it's the best that there is. Just have to accept that it's a plot hole.
I mean, if Jacob were a seer, he'd be able to predict how many bagels every day to make so they'd never run out. He'd always have the exact right amount of the exact right bagels.
That's a real problem. So that would be a great bagel shop that I would frequent.
So taking a turn for the slightly darker, because we know we're getting towards the end of the film here, and the Lestrange tomb, was it Père Lachaise, did you say?
Yeah, Père Lachaise. I think that's what the captions say. I still don't understand it, because I don't understand how that relates to Lestrange. The first time I watched the movie, all of that just kind of went over my head.
Everybody mumbles in this movie too.
Yes.
We talked about that before. But, when Grindelwald comes to tell everybody or show everybody what's to come, and that's, again, a precognitive vision that general audiences can be shown, Muggle or Wizard or not, Jacob has this harrowing line of, like, he looks straight at the camera and goes, "Another war?" and is, like, real sad about it. And as we talked before, Jacob is a veteran. Jacob is a war veteran. Newt is a war veteran. These are people who just got out of the biggest war in the world up till that point within the last 10 years and are now looking down the barrel of another war, a bigger war, one that has mushroom clouds, which probably don't mean anything to them, but they can tell mass devastation. And the film doesn't dwell on Jacob's military history. It's even a throwaway line in the first film. But at least in this moment, emotionally, you can tell exactly what's going on with Jacob, and it matters that he's a veteran. He's not inclined to seek out war for profiteering or adventure's sake. He's terrified of it. And the idea that Queenie would join somebody who's trying to start this war, even though he's claiming to be trying to prevent it, is also terrifying.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, this is someone who's already fought. and he's still traumatized, surely, from fighting in this war. And I'm sure this line, by the way, resonates with a lot of people watching, whether they're a veteran or whether they have strong opinions on war.
Try as he might, he really can't get Queenie to come back with him. And I don't think it's his fault at all. But also, what do we think that means for Jacob? Like, Queenie really is hung up on this idea of marriage freedom. Like, Grindelwald does not really have to promise her anything. It's clearly an empty promise he does not intend to live up to, but she's hooked. Did anything he say, could he have said anything to get her to stay?
I was wondering this too, and watching the scene, I don't think so. She is so far gone at that point. We've speculated maybe she was under some sort of potion or something after drinking that tea. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So maybe. No, I don't think there's anything he could have done. I mean, Grindelwald was really very powerful and compelling in that moment with his audience and with what he stood for and his goals. And yeah, there's no turning back at that point.
Do we think that it's all problematic that this was all taking place inside of a cemetery? Is that foreshadowing in any way?
His death?
Any of them?
Maybe.
That's too broad to be for. If it's for any of them, it's too broad.
Everybody dies in the next movie.
Yeah.
Well, to the point about him being able to see what was going on inside the crystal ball, and then he's the one that ends up kind of leading them there.
Yeah, fair. It is interesting that in both the Potter books and in this story, the moment that's sort of representative of the bad guy's ascent to power takes place in a graveyard.
How much darker of a setting can you get? You can't get much darker than that.
Right.
So
I was the set lighting team finally got everything they were ever hoping for in that one. Or the director did. He's just like stone slabs.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, final monochrome. Despite the downward note of sort of Jacob's romantic arc in this film, he does not get to have the girl. He does remain with the group. And the last time, I like that they kind of left it open-ended. Because it clearly was not something they were capable of going into in the second film. But the idea that Jacob is on the bridge to Hogwarts with Nagini, with Theseus, with, Newt and the group is titillating. And the way that he looks, he's not looking straight at Hogwarts. He's just looking kind of vaguely in the distance. And like, I remember us all asking at the time, can he see Hogwarts?
And canon says no. But it's another question if he can go inside, and clearly that answer is yes. But I think some people did some digging on the canon around all this, and yes, you cannot see Hogwarts, and yes, you can enter Hogwarts as a Muggle.
I think that makes sense.
Maybe if you know about Hogwarts, you can see it
like
as a Muggle.
Maybe.
Like that's how the parents of students can go in, like Moaning Myrtle's parents.
Right.
That's the canon that I was referring to. Yeah, or
Great
maybe
call out on Myrtle.
What if you get personally invited by the headmaster? Then maybe you can see it, or the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher in this movie.
Someone
being
has
Dumbledore?
to blindfold you, then they walk you across the bridge, and then you can, like, once you're in, you can see the walls and everything.
Or maybe you have to hold a wand to be able to enter Hogwarts. That's your pass in. It's like a visitor
maybe you have
pass.
to hold the ticket from King's Cross. Stick to your ticket. You've got to walk all the way in.
Ooh, I like these theories.
Maybe. But at least, by the end of it, Jacob is not shuttled off to America to live in a life of darkness. He gets to keep his friends. Already now, Jacob's prospects are looking up. He's with the group that I think he really cares about. I don't know how he's managing the pastry shop, but if the movie doesn't spend any time on it, I don't want to spend any time on it. So it's like, okay, that's just, he's delegated the work to somebody else. Yeah, so I do say, I have this note here that I think Jacob's character, we get another film where his warmth and his joviality really work for the plot, really work for the characters. He betters the lives of everyone around him, and he gets to keep his friends at the end of the film. So net positive for Jacob, I think, overall. And he escapes that abusive relationship with Queenie.
Yeah.
So, big deal.
Well, speaking of that, we'll look at what the future holds for Jacob in a moment. But first, this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. We talk about BetterHelp a lot on this show, including earlier in this episode. And this month, we're discussing the stigmas around mental health. Many people think therapy is for so-called crazy people, but therapy doesn't mean something's wrong with you. It means you recognize that all humans have emotions and we need to learn to control them, not avoid them. And we've been taught that mental health shouldn't be a part of normal life, but that's wrong too. We take care of our bodies with the gym, the doctor, and nutrition. We should be focusing on our minds just as much. Therapy really works wonders, and I think you'll hear that from anyone who's been in therapy. It took me a while to get started, but once I did, I was wondering why it took me so long. And we all here on the panel talk about it because we've all experienced therapy and we know it can work really well. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can be matched with a therapist in under 48 hours. Give it a try and see why over 2 million people have used BetterHelp online therapy. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, and MuggleCast listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/MuggleCast. That's BetterHelp.com/MuggleCast. All right, so what does the future hold for Mr. Kowalski?
Looks like he's going to brag to some children about a special wand.
And they can't touch it.
I do like that scene.
He's also going to walk through some kind of wall, but he seems to not walk through with the wizard, so I'm not sure how he manages to get through a portal. Maybe people, muggles all the time just lean on the wall between the platforms of 9 and 10 and just end up on platform 9 3/4. I don't know.
How confusing.
That's a nightmare. Security nightmare.
Because he walks through a wall, but behind it looks like Newt and Eulalie. And I don't know how he gets through.
I missed or forgot about that in the trailer. What other predictions do we have about what the future holds for Jacob? Micah, do you have any?
That's really what my question was. I'm not sure exactly what the future holds for him outside of a Fisher-Price wand, but I wonder, I know we're going to have a prediction episode at some point closer to when the Secrets of Dumbledore come out, but I thought maybe we could put this to rest once and for all. Is Jacob the sacrificial lamb of the Fantastic Beasts series?
100%.
Well, okay, wait, hold on. What does that mean? Is that a different question than asking, will he die? Like, what does it mean to be the sacrificial lamb? I'm not getting the reference.
Well, Micah likes goats, lambs. He just likes working in goats and lambs wherever he can.
No, I think it is a really good clarification question, though, because being a sacrificial lamb does not necessarily mean that he will die. It could mean that something else befalls him, but I can't really envision what that would be, apart from, he loses memory of everything at the end of the series and he has no recollection of what he went through. That would be kind of tragic. I think you could call that a sacrificial lamb moment.
Or he wakes up and it was all a dream.
The new hard ending.
Can you imagine?
Or he has to give up Queenie in order for them to beat Grindelwald. That could be. I guess that doesn't really make him the sacrificial lamb. It makes Queenie the sacrificial lamb. But it would still, he's the one that has to sacrifice his love, I guess.
I think he will be the sacrificial lamb in that he dies because he's being put in the middle of this war between Dumbledore and Grindelwald in the greater wizarding world. This war very much involving Muggles, and he's going to lose his life over this debate.
Yeah. Well, Andrew and Micah, you both know this, but coming up here shortly, we have some insider intel on some of the possible ways that Jacob will die over the course of this franchise. So we'll be going over those shortly. It's a list of interesting things we've heard from the writers. We're going to get sued one day.
Sorry. All this fake info.
I can't wait.
Welcome to MuggleCast in 2022, where we're actually just actively making shit up.
Micah, this question number 5, I think, is a good one, too.
Yeah, so I wanted to know, we see him on the train, right, with the rest of the crew for this particular film. But I wanted to know, what do we think his purpose is in Secrets of Dumbledore? What does he bring to the table that the rest of the team really needs, besides some really awesome baked goods?
Heart.
Muggle in wizarding situations.
Like what, though? They could have left him at home.
Comedic humor.
Well,
No.
we know that. Oh, yeah, but like tactically, what does he do?
What does he offer?
Yeah, I would say heart would be a throwaway answer, except we know how much Dumbledore harps on love being such a key. So even if Jacob can't do magic, maybe having his open heart there would be important to whatever magic is happening around him. So maybe there's that aspect. For me, it's the element of surprise, or because Voldemort in particular tended to underestimate characters like Neville, who was pureblood, by the way, but it's an easy trap to fall into if you have a Muggle running around, to just assume that they're not going to be consequential to you. And so maybe Dumbledore really is relying heavily on Grindelwald, just being like, this Muggle is clearly around because he's their friend, but he's never going to surprise me or do anything special.
And then Jacob totally surprises him by crafting a pipe bomb, just takes Grindelwald out.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's how it wraps.
So I learned about this in France.
You wouldn't expect the Muggle to be able to kill you. That is a good secret weapon.
Maybe he's there to just translate the world to Newt and then translate Newt to the rest of the world, because it's just Newt is so awkward and also mumbles.
I love that idea. He's Newt's personal translator.
Maybe he's got good girl advice and good Grindelwald advice.
Oh.
Maybe good war advice. He was a soldier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe Newt trains him up to be a better beast caretaker, and maybe Jacob has a way with beasts. It's been undiscovered until movie 3. And now he'll really lean into that skill set that he's only just discovered.
You can't replace Bunty.
Yes, you can.
Or will he?
Hey,
it's a
I
good
will not
point.
have Bunty erasure on this show, okay? It's
Her
not
and
happening.
Yusuf are going to get married in the next movie. But it's a good point, though. I mean, he gets along really well with Dougal, the demiguise. The mooncalves, in Newt's case, really seem to like him when he's feeding them. So maybe you got something there. But I could also foresee a scene in the next movie where you need a Muggle to kind of get entry somewhere or have a conversation with somebody, where maybe if you're a wizard just doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
If you're interacting with other Muggles, we know that wizards are terrible at that.
Hence Arthur Weasley.
I think I have it. I think he's going to be the official cook for all of Newt's animals, all of Newt's beasts.
Oh,
I love this idea.
That way we can keep Bunty.
Clever and cute. I like it.
So we have an exclusive 10 ways in which Jacob Kowalski will die. Now, we're not saying that all of these things are going to come true. Obviously, he can only die once. But we've heard some rumors from the writer's room about some scenarios that they're throwing around for consideration. Number 10, thanks to Eric's sleuthing, it's Jacob slips on a strudel and he just falls into traffic crossing the street. It's so random.
I wanted a very mundane death, because none of us are exempt from the possibility of a random stray strudel ruining our day.
This is a good reminder that life is fragile.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew.
You got to watch out for those errant strudels, Feisty. Okay, number 9. He stumbles into the Forbidden Forest unknowingly, and he's just never heard from again.
They warned him
because the Forbidden Forest is really dangerous.
Yeah.
And we really wonder, again, why is that next to a school?
Really shouldn't be.
How amazing would it be if there was a shot of him just wandering into the Forbidden Forest? That was it. We never heard from him again. Nobody ever found out what happened to him. It was just like, where'd Jacob go? And he's just lost forever. That's it.
It's going to be like, this is a very old reference, so probably going to not land. But in the TV show Family Matters, they had like a third child who goes upstairs one day and is never in another episode again.
Oh my God.
She just disappears.
I love that. Okay, number 8. Probably a pretty obvious one, but the Fisher-Price wand backfires on him and he just dies.
Oh.
Dumbledore's like, oh, I thought it was safe. I'm so sorry. oh my gosh, oh my goodness, oh no.
Well, we know death is irreversible. Oh, shame.
Right. And
Bugger.
that's why he won't let Petunia come to Hogwarts. He's like, listen, the last time I had one of y'all here. Okay, number 7. Credence takes Jacob out due to being jealous that Dumbledore treats Jacob so special when he ignores his own, alleged brother. Gives Jacob a wand, alludes to some perhaps dormant magical ability. Credence had to learn about that through Graves, right? So he's feeling pretty salty about it. 6-1, similar to the Forbidden Forest line. He gets lost in Newt's suitcase forever and he's just presumed dead. He never comes out. There's so many beasts in there. They just don't know what happened.
Newt's like, I've really got to clean up in there.
One of them bit his head off.
Right. I mean, it gives all new meaning to Roshni's idea that Jacob is the beast feeder in the next movie.
Oh my goodness. That hurts.
I'm sorry. See, this is what happens when you let me do this. I have a very dark sense of humor.
This is great.
This is where my mind
this is great. This whole thing needs to be a social media clip.
I'm starting to worry for Jacob now. For the first time. Nothing we've talked about before has done it, but now I'm actually concerned for his fate.
Okay, number 5. Theseus uses Jacob as a human shield against a fantastic beast. I can 100% see this happening. Theseus is like, oh, you're just a muggle. Like he's so dismissive of him in the trailer. I could see it happening.
And he misleads Jacob to get him over in front of him. He's like, hey, come over here. I got to show you something.
He just jumps behind him and grabs him and uses him as a human shield.
Aw.
Roshni, you had a couple of additions here. You want to share?
Yeah. So I found out from the writer's room, my own special contacts, that Jacob actually gets crushed by a giant loaf of bread that's just expanding out of the oven as he's baking it. And he doesn't realize, that it's magical. He's used some magical flour and just gets crushed.
Yeah. So he gets into the kitchens at Hogwarts and he's trying to bake some baked goods and all goes wrong.
Backfires on him.
Kills all the house elves too in the process.
Oh, they can apparate away.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
And I heard that he walks into a rally filled with dangerous and highly accomplished wizards without any protection. You already did that one. Sorry.
Yeah. He lived to tell the tale.
He's stronger than we think.
Yep. Number 2 here, he sacrifices himself to save Queenie from Grindelwald, and he lives long enough for Queenie to whisper, I'm pregnant.
Wow. That one seems like it will actually happen.
Yeah, that's what I think is going to happen. And then number 1, he is given a secret mission by Dumbledore to become Grindelwald's personal pastry chef and slip him poisoned baked goods. He's discovered by Grindelwald. Rest in peace.
Calamity.
This also seems possible.
Yeah.
It does. Wow. I think we have a couple of honorable mentions here.
Yeah, I had a few. The first is chokes on a Niffler pastry, just to be clear.
Right. Again, anytime you put something into our mouths, we are risking our lives just a little bit.
And I was told that they were actually going down this road in the first movie, but they decided against it. He finally mates with an Erumpent.
Oh my gosh.
The Erumpent wants to. The Erumpent was definitely very into him.
And Queenie's like, what the hell?
Be like, sorry, the Erumpent will never take away my agency.
All right. Well, if you have any feedback about today's discussion, you can contact us by writing or sending a voice message to MuggleCast@gmail.com. For the latter, just record a message using the voice memo app on your phone. You can also use the contact form on MuggleCast.com, or you can leave a voicemail on our phone. The number is 1-920-3-MUGGLE. That's 1-920-368-4453. Speaking of feedback, Laura, what is our next discussion?
Next week, we're going to be talking about Snape and Lily and their friendship / Snape's unrequited love for Lily, what that meant. We're going to really dive deep on this and talk about these dynamics because there are aspects of this relationship that are problematic. And there are also aspects of it that are pretty sympathetic. So I think that we're going to be able to have a really nuanced conversation about what the relationship between Snape and Lily meant in a way that I don't think we've done on this show before. I don't think we've ever devoted a whole episode to these two characters' dynamic. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Dropped.
Well, and I also think we wanted to do this because we noticed that they were both born in January. And like I said, at the top this Jacob discussion, we try to time these with their birthdays, try to time these character discussions with their birthdays. So yeah, send in your feedback if you have any thoughts on Snape and Lily, and we might include it next week. If not, we might include it in a future Muggle Mail episode.
I know it's controversial, but my husband and I, our wedding rings do say after all this time. His stays after all this time and mine stays always.
Aww.
I think that's very sweet.
Somebody came to my defense last week, said, I agree with you, Andrew. Maybe it was Roshni.
It was not, but it is a very problematic relationship. But there's something about that line that kind of, it transcends it.
Yeah, I 100% agree. This is kind of a tangent, but it sort of reminds me about when people are really judgy about getting certain kinds of Harry Potter tattoos. Mm-hmm. It's like, listen, the relationship between, the reader and the book is sacred. And while there may be problematic, like social norms or relationships portrayed in the books, what you take away, the themes that really resonate with you, those are special and nobody can touch those. So I 100% support that very cute wedding ring idea, Roshni. That's lovely.
All right. Well, it's time for Quizzage.
Last week's question: which Phelps twin who plays Fred Weasley in the Harry Potter films has a scar on his left eyebrow? And this was your litmus for understanding and finally being able to tell the Phelps twins apart if you struggled with that before. The correct answer, scar above his left eyebrow, it's James Phelps who plays Fred Weasley. Congratulations to the 50 plus people who did get the correct answer, including Connor G, Ed and Skip the Dogs, Emma Roberts, Confused Picture, I Don't Have a Cool Name Idea, Josh Haskins, Kylie, Last Word is Scar, Leonard Not Skinnerd, Manda Loves Micah, Raven Connor, Rubius Tannenbaum, The Evil Weevil, and The Wild Witch of Yorkshire is back.
2 Micah references. Great.
Love it. They're stacking up.
Micah, it sounds like someone's lusting over you.
And apparently someone took my last name, too.
And the first name, Rubius. Very nice. Very nice. So, next week's Quizzitch question. This one's a deep cut, and it's from the original Fantastic Beasts pre-script. What was the name of Jacob Kowalski's former fiance, i.e. not Queenie?
Wow.
The answer behind this can be found in supplemental material Case of Beasts.
One of the spin-off books.
It's not Bunty either.
And it's not Bunty. It's not Queenie and it's not Bunty. Those
and
are
it's
two
not
freebies.
Yusuf Kama.
Submit your answer to us it might be Yusuf Kama. Submit your answer to us over on the MuggleCast website, mugglecast.com/Quizzitch, or click Quizzitch from the top menu of the site.
Okay. Couple other reminders. Make sure you're following MuggleCast for free in your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. Every one will be automatically sent to you. And leave us a review in Apple Podcasts or Spotify if you use either of those platforms. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media. We're doing a lot of fun stuff over there. Our username is MuggleCast on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And finally, we would love your support at patreon.com/MuggleCast. Roshni is a Patreon supporter, and she joined us today. It's one of the benefits. If you pledge at the Slug Club level, you get the chance to co-host MuggleCast one day. Thanks for joining us, Roshni. It was great having you.
Thank you for having me. Dream come true.
Oh, you were awesome.
You were awesome. All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I'm Andrew.
I'm Eric.
I'm Micah.
I'm Maura.
And I'm Roshni.
Bye, everyone.